Okay. Okay, let's now change the logo. That's what I was working on, by the way, the logo. The only version of the logo I could find, thanks. The only version of the logo I could find was not very. Oh, that's going to be a little bit of a problem potentially. We'll just do it this way. This should be fine. Let me do a modification here. Let's do it this way instead then. So half of that is 612, or 512, I should say. And then twice that is 390. That, and this. And then I just need to move this over slightly. Okay, and then we'll do this. Okay, let's change this to this instead. Like that. There we go. Now that'll fit nicely in my little thing here. Is that pretty much centered? Yep. Okay, so that's that. Now I need to actually, that time that I was away, I was not spending seeing if the game would work on its own. So let's try it. If it doesn't, then I can try to do a window capture or whatever it's called. So we'll see. Yeah, it's going to need to be a window capture because oh, it was a small window size, but now it looks like it went full screen. No, it did not. Okay, I don't know. Let's do this. I'll switch this. And let's not do it that way. Let's see. Let's do... Does it capture that, or is that... It does. Oh, perfect. Okay. There'll be bars on the sides, but it's a square window anyway. So there's no way I'm going to get around that. I trim that. You'll still see black bars. So we'll just leave it like this. That's perfect. Okay. You can see my mouse pointer? Okay, great. All right. This one's a little bit different. This one is basically a story game. So a lot of reading and stuff. Maybe I should get myself more caffeine. No, I think I'll be okay. But more reading and not trying to figure out clues and things. I think so much as just you read and you proceed along with the storyline. I think is how it works. So, all right, here we go. Oh, let's look at preferences first. Hang on. Window full screen. Now let's just leave it windowed. That's fine. It's working, so let's not change that. Transitions all. Text speed. Oh, let's do this, I guess. Auto forward time. Can I do this? And then I just have to push a key or something? Skip scene messages. Skip all messages. What the? Let's not do that. Sound volume. Maybe like that. Stop skipping. joystick, but let's not use joystick. I'll just use my mouse. It's an interesting set of options here. They're not like normal. Okay. I think that's good. Yeah, okay, return. And start. Here we go. Why would it matter, she thought. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. She stared towards the horizon. Words reached her ears from the distance. Why would I care? She felt the tears welling in her eyes. I don't care. A shadow covered the sunlight, and all of a sudden, she felt only coldness. The others pulled her with them into the carriage. Nothing is worth caring about. She saw the horizon change its shape. From time to time, a tree or house covered the sight, but never for long. Why did this happen? The carriage stopped, and she had to get out. The air was warm. She felt the slight breeze softly on her skin. It didn't happen, she lied to herself. It never happens. She continued her way home. When she looked at the door and turned the key to unlock it, she sighed. It never should happen. The first thing she noticed when she woke up was the smell of tea, just like every morning. Or maybe not like every morning. Her eyes slowly opened. For a moment, she had to think hard before she remembered why this day was special. It was her first day at school. School. Something she had anticipated for years. Not everyone could go to school, especially not in this town, with limited numbers of students on every school. That she got a spot, in her eyes, was a miracle. The thought of going to school for the first time woke her up completely, and she jumped on her feet. A moment later, she sat at the kitchen table together with her parents, having breakfast. Her family was small. She had no brothers or sisters, only her parents. None of her other relatives was still alive, and the little girl felt like her and her family were very close. In general, she felt like she had a nice family. She loved her parents and the life she had. And of course, that she already found a spot at school. Shyria. When I am older, I am going to become a teacher. Or a princess. Father. With a huge castle? Shyria. Yes, and horses. A lot of horses. And cows. And sheeps. Mother. Sheep, sweetheart. Huh? Shyria. Mother. It's sheep, not sheeps. You will never become a teacher or a princess if you don't work out your grammar. Although technically that's not grammar, that's usage, but that's okay. Anyway, I was an English major, so anyway. When people say grammar and they use it wrong, I always try to point out so they know for the future. Anyway, as usual, her parents began to teach her grammar and spelling of words. It seemed as if they were eager to get her daughter one of the positions she so desired in the future. How wrong that impression would prove just a couple of days later. A good thing about good times is that they are happy. The bad thing about good times is that it can only get worse. A few days later, Shyria had just come home from school. Mother. How was your day at school? Shyria. I was the only one who knew all letters of the alphabet already, so the teacher gave me an extra good feedback for today. Father. Great, Shyria. All the practice is really paying off. Mother. Don't rest on it, though. If you get lazy because you did one thing right, you're not going to get anywhere. Shyria. Of course. I want to be a princess or a teacher with many horses. Father. You will get there, sweetheart. Mother. Not if you don't keep it up. A few hours later. Father, Shyria, come here. Being an obedient child, Shyria immediately walked out of her room towards her parents. Both of them are sitting around the table with one of her teachers from school. Her father looked very serious, while her mother and the teacher were smiling. Your teachers come to give you special classes since you are so far ahead of the other students. Shyria was completely stunned. Being allowed to go to school was awesome enough for her, but receiving private lessons seemed too good to believe. After she hadn't responded for a short while, her mother broke the silence. Well then, why don't you show him your room? Shyria, can't we study here? There's a table. Mother, stop being so unthankful and show him your room. Even though Shyria was, after all those years, used to her mother's harsh tone, it still frightened her a little bit. Without another word, she nodded towards her teacher, made a gesture towards her room, turned around, and walked into her room. She felt like something was not right. It was an undefined yet uneasy feeling around her stomach. Her mother was always like that, so she didn't understand why it would cause a different reaction for her that time. Before she could give it any more thought, her teacher had stepped into the room, now standing behind her, looking around the room. Shyria quickly turned around to not seem impolite. She saw how her teacher closed the door behind him and turned towards her. Teacher, your family is not as wealthy as I had thought, is it? Not knowing what to respond to that, Shyria shrugged and looked towards the ground. Teacher, well, it doesn't matter. After another critical look around her room, in which he could find nothing but a bed and a lot of undefined objects on the ground, he sat on the ground and gestured towards Shyria to sit with him. Opening one of the books, he turned towards her and began to explain what the book was about, and that he wanted to practice the alphabet in more advanced ways with her today. Shyria did her best to focus on the text in front of her, and read with as few mistakes as possible. Most of the time, she managed and soon completed the first chapter without any major difficulties. However, the uncomfortable feeling did not go away. After another chapter was over, her teacher nodded and closed the book. Teacher, well done, Shyria. You are really far ahead of the others. I will come regularly to give you lessons like this. Shyria nodded. She'd enjoyed the lesson, even though she still felt strangely uneasy. Teacher, now we only have one small problem. Teacher, I am going to give you all these lessons. That takes time. Time I could be spending somewhere else making money. We need to find something to make this worthwhile. The uneasy feeling Shyria had all this time increased. She didn't say anything, looked at the ground. In all honesty, she didn't have a clue what he could possibly want from her. While she was still thinking about possible ways to pay him, or polite ways to tell him that private lessons would not be necessary if they bothered him, her teacher put the books aside and grabbed her arm. Surprised, she looked up to him. He smiled. When he got up, she was forced to get on her feet along with him. Pulling her to him, he took a few steps and approached the bed. Are you kidding me right now? Is that where this is heading? Shyria had no idea what he wanted, but a deep fear began to spread within her. Then the man, still holding her arm in a firm grip, tore her clothes off her body and threw them in a corner of the room. Okay, I think I'm done with this. We'll go one, maybe two more. Violently threw her to the bed, where she crawled into the corner in a poor attempt to get away. It wasn't enough. He quickly took off his own clothes and was already on the bed with her. Without understanding what had really happened, Shyria still felt like it had been wrong, and spent the rest of the day in her room. Wow. That got dark super fast. Without moving, without even closing her eyes, apart from the occasional blinking. The next morning, she intended to bring up the awkward topic towards her parents, but their cheery faces and the happy atmosphere was so strange to her that she barely said or ate anything. Throughout the next months, more of her teachers started to visit for private lessons, soon beginning to come together. Okay, I think I'm changing this rating. Give me a second here. I've got to change this rating. This is messed up. This is not H6 at all. Where are we? Here. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Sorry, but this subject matter could really mess up a younger kid or something. Throughout the next months, more of her teachers started to visit her for private lessons, soon beginning to come together. What the frick, dude? A year later, she found herself completely changed. All the joy of a child in her age had faded, and her dreams of what she wanted to become had changed. Father, how's it going at school, sweetheart? Are you getting along with your plans of becoming a princess? Shyria, I don't want to be a princess no more. Father, oh? What do you want to be then? Shyria, a traveler or a soldier. Father, you don't say. These jobs are nothing for a sweet little girl like you. Shyria's response was nothing but a cold glare towards her father, which included much more hatred than should be possible for such a young girl to feel. She got up from the table and attempted to leave the house, but turned around one more time before leaving. Shyria, I want to be a traveler, or a soldier, or anything else that brings me far away from this place. Overwhelmed by pain and anger, she almost sprinted out of the house, out of the town, into the nearby forest. This was the only place that could give her comfort, and as she had discovered a couple of months back. After attempting to talk to her parents about what was going on, they had only responded with anger towards her revealing it, and disgust. Since then, she had completely given up her family and lost most any love she had ever felt towards her parents. Within 1 year, this young girl had become a serious person, full of pain, anger, and hatred. She controlled herself. With every week, every day, every hour, she succeeded better at it. Years went by without changing anything. Shyria grew up to be the person she had become through all those years of abuse. A serious, lonely, depressed, and broken woman, without hopes, dreams, or feelings. She accepted her daily fate and lived through it the best she could. Every day was the same as the last and equal to what the next day would bring. Over the course of time, Shyria had changed. The control, the pain, the anger, and disgust, all that had taught her to be strong. And she was. There was absolutely nothing that could happen that would actually shake her in that confidence. At least, so she thought. Oh, jeez, I can't even imagine what's coming. One morning, something happened that did change her. The first thing she noticed was that her period didn't come. She didn't think much of it. Second thing she noticed was that it repeatedly didn't come. She got suspicious. The third thing she noticed was at the beginning of a regular morning sickness. Then she knew it. She was pregnant. Her first reaction was despair. She didn't want a child, especially not of those bastards. She didn't want to carry and raise a child that would become like them. Why would all of this happen to her? Wasn't everything already enough? What had she done to make life punish her so hard? All she wanted was to die. Nothing more and nothing less went on in her mind. After a while, though, she had calmed down at least a bit. She looked down on her body and imagined the tiny person inside of her. Then she felt it. It was a warm feeling, kind of like drinking hot chocolate after a day out in the cold, starting around her stomach, spreading across her entire body. Not long, and she could feel it in her very being. At first, she was extremely confused. She didn't remember any feeling like this, wondered what happened to her. Days after, she finally realized what was going on. She felt love. For the first time in 10 years, she was able to love someone. It took her a long time to understand what exactly that meant, but when she finally understood, She looked down on her stomach where she believed the baby to be and smiled. It was a warm smile, full of the tenderness of a mother's care. After a very short time of consideration, she decided to remain silent about the matter towards other people, including her parents. She came to the conclusion that it would be better to deal with the situation herself as long as possible. At first, all she hoped for actually worked out. Her stomach didn't grow a lot. Her morning sickness soon got better, and her bond with the baby kept getting stronger. She was wondering if the child would actually be able to feel that as well, or whether it was rather something non-existent for the baby and only important for her. On one hand, she wished to receive such an answer, but on the other hand, it was a nice thing for her to think about during long sleepless nights, or when she was out in the woods. The forest and nature helped her just as much as the love of her unborn child. Both things kept her alive and, more importantly, kept her sane. Months passed, during which she didn't even lose hope, or even feel bad about anything that went on. Ever since she had gotten pregnant, that pregnancy seemed to protect her from every kind of evil or hopeless thought. For a long time, everything went well. She barely gained any weight and seemed to have no pregnancy issues at all. In the 8th month of her pregnancy, though, she slowly started to develop the usual symptoms of a pregnancy. Her stomach began to grow, she had a way better appetite than usual, and in general, she seemed to gain some weight. After things had continued for a while like that, her parents began to notice that something was not right. "Father, Shyria, we need to have a talk." Shyria was shocked. She hadn't spoken to her parents in weeks, and for years their only conversations had consisted of a few words or sentences on either side. Her father got straight to the point. "Father, something is weird. We don't give you that much to eat to make you this thick." Shyria, as usual, responded with silence. "Father, have you lost your voice?" Shyria, "No." "Father, then what's going on?" Again, Shyria said nothing. She did not know what she could say to make everything sound harmless, or hide the fact that she was expecting a child. "Father, okay, if you don't want to say anything, we're going to do this the other way. You know what I think is going on?" "No," Shyria said. "Father, I think you have gotten yourself pregnant." Uncomfortable silence filled the room. "Father, so, is it true?" She didn't really get herself pregnant, but let's do this one. Shyria, "No, I did not get myself pregnant." Shyria, "If anything, you did. Both of you. By constantly using me to make some additional money. You think I enjoyed that? Don't you think I was a little bit too young for all you had them do to me? Don't you think a tiny bit of protection, comfort, and love would have helped? But no, you had to accept their offers. You had to look away. You had to betray your own daughter. And for what? Money? Reputation? Money. You betrayed the only person who ever loved you for who you are, and who ever looked up to you. No one else ever will. But fine. That was your fault. It was your mistake. And this right now, the fact that I'm getting a child, it is your doing. I have never ever hated anyone as much as I despise you. Both of you. You don't even deserve my attention. You don't have the right to talk to me. Never again. With these words, Shyria turned around and rushed into her room, slamming the door behind her. 2 days later. For the last 2 days since her parents had found out about her pregnancy, they hadn't spoken a word. All their encounters consisted of angry or hateful glares and uncomfortable silence. None of them lasted longer than a minute. It seemed like finding out about that pregnancy had torn the family apart completely and given them the last push into hating each other. After school, Shyria now went into her beloved forest instead of going home, not giving her family or teachers the opportunity to do anything to her during the day anymore. At night, she had to go home. She wasn't afraid of the forest and the creatures that lurked in its shadows in the darkness of the night, but staying out in the dark was disallowed in her village, and heavy penalties awaited those who dared to disobey. When she got home that evening, none of her parents even looked up. Neither did she look towards them. It seemed as if her parents had stopped thinking about her existence. However, that impression was not completely true. The first stroke came out of nowhere. She flinched, and silently turned away. It seemed to make him even more angry. A kick in the back followed his previous hit. Man, this is just like the most horrible, abused child in the universe. She's not horrible, but I mean, like, had horrible experiences, most abused child in the universe. There was little reaction from her. She wrapped her arms around her stomach to protect her unborn child. Another kick in the back. Somewhere in the back of her head, she heard the words, "Turn around," shouted at her, but she was too shocked to respond to the request. When a single tear ran down her cheek, she closed her eyes. He would not have the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She pulled her thoughts into her mind, withdrew herself from emotion, and did her best to keep it that way. It was the only relief she ever found in situations like this. This time, it was not only a relief, but also a mistake. With her not paying attention, he had walked around her. The attack hit her stomach. In an explosion of pain, she gasped for air. From the distance of her mind, she heard laughter. She barely felt the second kick, or the third, or the ones after. Tears slowly ran down her distorted face. When the pain began to change, she lost consciousness. Her relief only lasted for a few minutes. Soon after, she woke up. The pain was still there, but had changed from what she remembered it to be. It was a completely different kind of pain than anything she had ever felt before. For a moment she was confused, frightened. Then she realized what the attacks on her stomach had caused. The pain was not from the beating itself. She was giving birth. Hours later, it was finally over, and she held a baby in her arms, tiny but alive. She looked at it, held it tighter, smiled at it. It was a little baby girl. Shyria. She didn't know why, but she knew it sounded somehow right. She loved her child just as much, if not even more, than she always had. Holding her little daughter in her arms, she finally felt like she had someone to hold on to, someone to be there for, someone who would love her as much as she loved the child. In a way, she didn't want to tell her parents that the child was there. She was certain they hadn't found out about it yet. Then again, it felt even more uncomfortable to think about the consequences when they found out. After all, her stomach was not large anymore. I think this might incite their wrath more. Let's do this for now, I suppose. Shyria, no, I cannot reveal you to my evil parents, my dear. And so she began to think about ways to possibly hide the child. She seemed to have found the perfect spot in the corner of her room between some garbage and old blankets. Shyria, at least it is comfortable and soft. Shyria had considered leaving her parents when she first found out she was pregnant. However, it would have been a nearly impossible matter not to be caught by any of the city guards. Children and teenagers, before they become adults, were not allowed to live away from their parents. In fact, it was considered a crime in the area for a child to even consider leaving their family before becoming adults. Having her family against her would certainly be easier than having the entire city against her. That is what she thought at least. She went on with her plan to hide her daughter, and for a few days everything seemed to work out. The child rarely made any noise, unusual but lucky. However, not even the nicest baby never cries, and so did this young girl a few days after her birth. At first, her parents thought the noise came from outside. When it didn't stop, they listened more closely. Sweat of shock started pouring down their necks when they got the thought that it might come from their daughter's room. Shyria heard the steps of her parents approaching, but couldn't help it. She didn't know what to do to hide her baby any longer. She stood up in front of the child, protective, but not in a matter of hiding it anymore. Her parents entered the room. They looked at Shyria, then gazed down upon the small bundle that was the child. Her mother just stood there, staring in shock at Shyria. Her father's reaction was different. His face was blank when he calmly approached her, holding right in front of her. For a moment, time stood still when father and daughter looked into each other's eyes. Then, with a sudden and surprisingly swift movement, he pushed Shyria to the side. She fell, hitting her head on a piece of metal trash on the ground. Barely conscious, she attempted to get back on her feet to battle her father, but she was too weak. She saw him approaching the child, kneeling next to it. Slowly, as if he didn't want to disturb the baby, he took the pillow from underneath her and looked at it for a short while. Oh my gosh! He's gonna friggin' kill the baby? Then with a bright smile toward Shyria, he slowly put the pillow on her daughter's face and pressed down. Only a few quiet noises came through the pillow, underlining the little girl's struggle for air, for life. A short while longer, the tiny arms and legs desperately struggled to remove the pillow, but against the man they were helpless, and so was Shyria. Her father held the pillow on the child for a little while after she had stopped moving, apparently to be certain she was dead, gave his daughter another grim smile, and left the room together with his wife. Once they had gone, Shyria stopped her struggle to get back on her feet. Her head sank to the ground, back on the hard metal piece that had caused the damage to her head before. As quietly as her baby had died before, she began to cry. Tears continued to stream down her cheeks, dripping off the sides of her face in a never-ending rhythm. Her head was empty. Not a single thought managed to come through to her mind. Then, slowly, the wall around her mind began to break. A fortress, built to protect her mind from the horrors of her childhood, crumbled within a breath. And with the walls fading, the thoughts came through. Shyria. Murdered. 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 In less than a second, she had stopped the tears welling in her eyes again. The thoughts pierced her mind and brought sadness, despair, and anger. In this moment, she realized how much she hated her parents, and the anger rising in her mind was too strong for her to tame. She stared at the ceiling as her body began to shake in bottomless hatred. In that moment, she uncovered her heart to the overwhelming emotion. She closed her eyes and enjoyed the feeling of grim determination. Shadows of evil crept from her mind to her heart, and from there to every inch of her body. With clenched fists, she whispered one last word before passing out. Murder. With that murmur, equally fact and promise, something broke within her. If life is like a tornado, then some are born on the inside, calm and tranquil, the eye of the storm. Some are born on the turbulent fringes. Some are yanked by from serenity by circumstance. What you did to me was life-changing. Now I will take yours. In a word, run. You marveled at how easily you could pierce my flesh. I relish the speed at which my blade finds your heart. You should thank me. I yearned for it to end, for death to come. Now for you, there is no escaping it. You took me from the light, plunged me into darkness. You slit my wrists. I'll slit your throat. I'm not going to make you suffer. I'm not going to make you scream. I'm not going to make you pray for death. I'm going to make you pray for life. When Shyria woke up, she, for the first time since everything had begun, felt no pain. There was only a grim determination which she at that point in time could not explain. Even upon holding at her dead child, she felt nothing but anger. There were no more tears welling in her eyes, no more sickness in her stomach, no more pain in her heart. She walked up to the baby, kneeled down, and picked Chyla up. After wrapping her up in a blanket she could find in the room, she held the child to her breast and left the house through the window in her room. Once outside, she was stunned by the insensitivity of the sunlight and held for just a minute. Then, once she'd given her eyes a chance to adjust to the change, she looked around and began to run. She turned right and, instead of leaving the small town, ran further into it. Without realizing what she had run in circles, or that she had run in circles multiple times, she finally found herself in a closed area and stopped in exhaustion. Falling on her knees, she dropped the bundle with the child next to her and bent forward to catch her breath. Without moving a bit, she dug her hands into the slightly wet earth in front of her. Hesitant, she began to dig slowly, but soon kept on speeding up until she had dug a huge hole in front of her. The sun was already fading, while before it had been high up in the sky. And finally, Shyria realized she had dug the entire afternoon until nightfall. Looking down her arms, she realized that they were covered in deep scratches, and some of her fingernails were broken. She didn't waste a moment caring for it. Having carefully put the bundle that included her daughter into the pit, she closed the hole again, burying the child that had been far too young to die under a pile of earth. When she was done, she grabbed the next stone she could find and dropped it on the grave in order to have the possibility to find it, and replace the stone with a proper gravestone someday. Without shedding a tear, she got up and looked around the area where she was. In her mind, she realized that she should be worried she had buried her baby in someone's garden, or that someone had seen her, but she could not bring her emotions to follow the worry. The twilight covered the area with strange shadows, as the young woman slowly turned around to look at the place where she was. There was no doubt she was standing in front of a large mansion, which probably belonged to some rich family. Shyria held her breath. Then she noticed it. The windows were covered with wooden planks, the doors barricaded and nailed shut. Shyria, it is abandoned? Shyria's heart began to beat faster. Excitement began to rise inside of her as she approached the old building and gazed through a crack in one of the wood planks. The inside was covered in cobwebs and a thick layer of dust. Shyria, it is abandoned. Shyria was surprised. She had no idea where in the town she was. Neither had she ever been here. Yet she managed to find one of a handful of abandoned buildings within this large village, and it hadn't even taken a lot of searching. Careful not to make any sound, she inspected the layers of planks and rocks that covered the back door. It seemed solid at first, but when she ducked down on the right side of it, she uncovered a few loose rocks, which she could easily move. She slowly pushed them to the side and crouched a bit into the hole she created. To her surprise, there were more unsolid rocks and branches inside, so she began to shove these to the side, which she believed to be necessary for getting towards the door. It only took little time until she found a huge, rotten plank with an ancient-looking handle. She put her hand on it and pushed with little strength. The door, against her expectations, did not break in immediately. She had pushed a piece of wood of the size of her hand out of the door. Shyria, this is going to be even easier and more quiet than I thought. She began breaking small pieces out of the door until she had a hole of the size that she could crouch through. Behind her, she put the stones and planks back in place in order to cover the entrance and hide that she had been here. Not that she would expect anyone to come and look at this building anymore. She crawled through the hole and looked up. Once she had made a step into the mansion, it turned extremely light. At first, she was blinded by the dust and light, but what she saw when she regained parts of her sight was breathtaking. The reason it had been turning light was a few lamps hanging from the ceiling in a rectangular pattern. Every one of them was glowing in a white light, covering the room in a comfortable gloom. Pillars separated the room and created 3 almost equal chambers, connected and parted at the same time. Wherever a pillar stood, the ceiling appeared to reach towards it, to embrace it. That created waves into the ceiling which Shyria had never equally seen anywhere else before. While the ceiling seemed to consist of round stones in different shades of brown, the walls were built of grayish bricks, which were wonderfully linked with white lines in and around every single stone. The floor appeared to be made of some of the same bricks that had been used for the walls also, but every stone on the floor was unique, with different size and color ranging from blackish gray to light brown. Silver and golden ornaments covered the ceiling, and pillars and decorative lines and symbols. Shyria wondered whether they had a meaning. It was only now that Shyria discovered the grave in the back of the left part of the large hall. She gasped in fearful surprise, but curiosity struck, and she slowly approached it. The strange light covered the path, and she felt as if she was dreaming when she stood next to the old stone grave and looked down on it. For a while, she just stood there and observed the grave. With a sarcastic grin, she had to admit to herself that she was expecting something to rise from it and chase her out of its home. But nothing like that happened. The grave remained still, peaceful. Silver moonlight flooded through a small window in the wall behind the grave and let the ancient stone construction shine in a magical aura. No sound managed to break through the walls of silence in that hall, and Shyria's unrhythmic breath echoed unnaturally long in the room. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Shyria placed her hand on the old rock and ran her finger down one of the gaps time had scratched into the stone board. She held her breath in expectation of something to happen, but nothing did. The magical atmosphere remained, but not a thing changed on the grave. Shyria sighed and suddenly felt very tired. All the digging for her baby's grave, the tension after, and the excitement of finding a new home had worn her out, and she sat on the ground next to the grave, leaning against the comfortably cool stone wall. Not a minute had gone by when she already fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke up, she felt calm. Looking around the room, she saw the grave again and the mostly empty room of the basement. The sight immediately increased her tension. In a way, she felt relieved that she truly managed to get away from her home, but she did not yet feel completely safe in this unexplored area. Slowly, she pushed herself up on her feet, using the grave to support herself. For a moment she struggled, as the world began to spin in a slow but rhythmic blur. But as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Incorrect. Apparently I clicked something else. Okay. When she felt halfway comfortable standing on her feet, she shuffled towards the central one of the 3 chambers. Despite her expectations to find the rooms full of different things, she found them completely empty. There was no table, no chair, no barrel, not even a piece of stone or anything she'd expected in an abandoned place like this. The layer of dust on the ground remained unbroken. Strangely, Shyria couldn't find a single print in the thick gray mass on the ground, except her own. It completely covered every inch of the ground, not even interrupted by signs of a mouse or spider digging its way through the material. In some way, the lit-up empty rooms had a frightening effect on Shyria. She quickly turned away, without paying attention to the third part of the room, and approached the heavy wooden door leading to the rest of the mansion, which was located in the central wall of the middle room. With slightly shaking hands, she forced the handle down, and with some effort pushed the door open. The old wood seemed as if it hadn't been opened in ages. For a little while, she just stood there, staring at the image in front of her. It was nighttime, though, or through open spaces in the walls and ceiling, she could see the stars on the clear sky above. Like small shining lanterns in the distance, they lit up the place and uncovered a wide staircase and walls covered with ornaments. Statues of people whom she thought to be dead for a long time were placed along the walls, giving the place protection with their undead cold glares. What? Let me reread that. Sorry. Statues of people whom she thought to be dead for a long time were placed along the walls, giving the place protection with their dead cold glares. There we go. I don't know where undead came in. Now it's suddenly like an undead. To her surprise, the staircase led up, as well as further down. By the time Shyria was able to continue and go up the stairs, hours had gone by. When she reached the main floor, she was shocked and surprised at the same time by the white golden light that shone through open windows along the sides of the large corridor she found herself in. The ground was covered in strange shadows created by the shining light of the morning sun. It seemed as if the light was reflected from the walls and the entire corridor was covered in a mystical, magical aura. Well, okay. I'm going to save this here. Okay. So there we go. All right. So that was the first part of A Dark Secret. I can't believe that went really super dark twice. Good night, dude. Okay, well, we're past that. Okay, I'm gonna eat something. So I'm gonna stop the stream. So Dark Secret will save this video as, or YouTube will save this video as its own. I'll get back on. I'm gonna eat something. I'll, probably like a half hour or something like that. I'll be eating something, and then we'll start Limbo. And we'll do Limbo for about, probably about an hour, I think. Let's see. If we say 7:30, 7:30 to 8:30, 8:30 to 9:30. No, 7:30 to 8:30. 7:30 to 9, that's an hour and a half. 9 to 10:30, that's an hour and a half. And then 10:30 midnight. That's what we'll do. So we'll do an hour and a half of Limbo, hour and a half of Observer, an hour and a half of Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. And other than Observer, which I expect already to be like have some dark scenes in it or whatever, other than that, I don't think there'll be any surprises for the rest of the games. Holy crapo. I did not realize Dark Secret was like that. Sorry. I did know, it supposedly, according to IndieDB.com, supposedly, I think, if I remember right, it was labeled as a horror game, right? But I don't know. Maybe not. Anyway, I think it was listed under horror, though. But it's not really horror, but it's certainly friggin' dark. Anyway, okay. So I will stop this, and then we will continue. We'll continue streaming my eating dinner here in just about maybe 5 minutes. The 5-minute thing is to give, if I stop the stream and then I start the stream again too quickly, YouTube just considers it part of the same video. But I'm doing this to separate the games into individual videos so that I can, so that they're in manageable bites, and I can separate them into like their own playlists and stuff. So anyway, all right, let me go ahead and stop this, and I'll see you in about 5 minutes. Okay, Chris? See you in